Attorney's Office. Can I help you?
Yeah, who is this speaking?
This is the City Attorney's Office.
Yeah, I'm asking for your name.
Oh, Nita. I'm sorry.
Nita, how are you, Nita?
Good.
Good. I was wanting to ask a question. I've often wondered about the jurisdiction of the city, and they say that it's the local jurisdiction, but yet they use the identification card, which may be either the state or the United States. So I'm a little bit confused on, if they say, if the city says they're only concerned with city matters, why are they using a card in another jurisdiction? I don't understand that.
Okay, who's using a card from another jurisdiction? I guess.
Well, like your identification card, I think that's under state law. Or is that under city law?
Your driver's license.
Yeah, identification, driver's license.
Yeah,
whatever.
okay. And so, I guess I'm still not with your question.
All right. Yeah. Well. What my idea and my understanding is that we're operating under the United States as a corporation, and I will ask the city certain questions about, the birth certificate, for example, and they will say, well, that's not a concern with the city, you have to go to the state.
Right.
But then I think, well, if it's state jurisdiction, then why do they require an officer to ask for a state issued document? I mean, that's what I'm confused about. I mean, there's many things I'm confused about, but that specific one is the one that I'm concerned with right now.
Okay, hold on just a second here.
Thank you.
City Attorney's Office, is Joseph.
Hi, Joseph. Yeah, my name is Dwayne Brothwell, and the thing is that I asked the city about the birth certificate. Do we have to fill one out? And they said, well, that's a state matter, state law. And I'm like, okay. So then,
You're kind of losing me here. What are we talking about here?
well, just give me some time there, Joseph, if you don't mind. Concerning the identification and the driver's license, that's a state law, state document, whatever, to my understanding. And a city will tell me that they don't have nothing to do with that I have to go to the state level, but yet they require agencies in the city to ask for a state document. So I'm kind of confused as to what jurisdiction, when an officer asks for an ID, does that mean that he's operating under the jurisdiction of the state or the city? Or the United States, for that matter. I mean, I just don't know.
He's operating in the jurisdiction of the city, but
Right.
the identification is issued by the state.
Okay.
Driver's license or birth certificate, whatever, those are issued by the state, and those are acceptable forms. Depending on what you're after, there would be an acceptable form of identification.
Right. Okay, so if, say, I interacted with an officer and he wanted my identification, would he be operating under the laws and statutes of the state?
Possibly.
Okay.
Depends on what he's doing. I mean, because like the police officers in Greeley, sometimes they're enforcing state laws, sometimes they're enforcing city laws.
Okay. So, what about the United States? Is there any time in our walk as a human being, as we're doing life, that we're under the jurisdiction of, say, the federal government?
Almost always, if we're within the United States, but the federal government laws and the state laws rarely conflict, and if they do, then it becomes an issue for the courts to figure out.
Right. One thing I've noticed is that when you start learning stuff, what happens is you will interact with an officer and you will educate him on some issues regarding jurisdiction, and they will continue to either usurp his authority over you, and he will say, well, you have to work that out in the court. It's almost like, well, you're gonna, even if I'm wrong, you're still gonna suffer.
Well, the fact of the matter is, officers are not trained to make those type of legal decisions. Those
Right.
type of legal decisions are made by the courts.
Right. So if an officer, if the people are living under the Constitution and we're operating under the laws of the Constitution, and we see Supreme Court rulings that say that certain things are certain ways, and then an officer who is ignorant, says, well, this is what my supervisor told me, rather than making an educated decision himself as to what the law truly is. I mean, isn't that kind of a little bit, I don't see that that's really right. Because I mean...
Doesn't make any difference. Their position is to enforce the laws as they're based on their guidance. If there's an issue with the law, or you think the law is interpreted differently, and you got to remember, not all Supreme Court cases stand up. Sometimes they're overturned by newer Supreme Court
Right.
cases. Officers would not know that.
Right.
That's why the courts figure those things out.
Right. So is there any time that we may be operating under the laws of commerce without knowing it? I mean...
That's conceivable. You could do that but interstate, I'm talking about interstate commerce, those are federal laws that you would deal with.
Right.
Certain things that are enforced by the state basically are kind of an extension of federal laws as
Okay.
far as vehicles have to meet certain standards and whatever else. The state usually has adopted the federal standards for that, for interstate commerce. They're not necessarily enforcing them as part of the interstate commerce clause of the Constitution. Rather, they're enforcing the laws that the state have adopted, which are usually in concert with those federal laws.
Yeah. Is there any time that we are in Uniform Commercial Code?
Yeah, Uniform Commercial Code is enforced constantly in Colorado or by any state.
Right.
As far as the way that things work, I mean, those are adopted usually by the states as well as some aspect of the federal government as well.
Yeah, I did read that we did adopt that. Now, one of the things that I'm confused about is when do we discern when we're operating under city codes and when we're operating under any other jurisdiction? I mean, that's where the confusion comes. I mean...
Well, the fact of the matter is you always operate under all three. You're operating under the federal laws, under the state laws, and under the city code. All three apply.
Okay. Well, there's one example in Colorado Revised Statute 25-2-112 speaking about the word conveyance. It will be logical to think that they would be thinking about an ambulance.
What is your issue?
Well,
what is your issue that we're trying to resolve? I'm not...
Okay, just one more question.
I'm not a legal advice here, so I'm saying you have an issue with something with the city, I can maybe address that. But I can't give you legal advice. That's not my role.
Okay, well, there's just one more thing. This word conveyance, it would seem that it would mean in English language that it means an ambulance or something like that, that if a person is born in an ambulance. But if you look at the legal definition, it's the legal transfer, it's a transfer of legal title to property. And so what some claim is that the birth certificate is an actual transfer of title to property of the child from the mother to the state.
First why you have to remember words frequently have more than one meaning depending on their usage. I
Right.
think you may be getting confused about that.
Yeah, that
So,
is.
But so I would recommend you talk to a private attorney, and you go that way. You can go into details of what your issue is, and they can give you some legal advice.
Well, I'm just thinking that I need to go to the government. I mean, I'm thinking they should have the truth, and they're the ones that
You do that through
are
the courts,
usurping
filing some
their
kind of action.
authority over me. So I think that's where I should get my information. I mean, wouldn't you think? I mean, if they don't know what they're doing, they shouldn't be in authority.
That's why we have attorneys. They can file suits, and then the courts to fight it out. And that's the role of the courts, is to make those determinations of what things mean in the laws.
All right. Well, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate your time.
No problem.
Bye bye. Ugh.